Hey everyone, I'm Adam Haritan. I'm hanging out here in the woods in western Pennsylvania, and I want to introduce you to a plant that's probably growing in your lawn right now. This plant right here, and it's one you're very likely to overlook because of its small size. However, we'd be wise to pay more attention to this plant for four main reasons. Number one, it's an edible wild plant. Number two, it's a medicinal wild plant. Number three, it's ubiquitous, it's found all over. And number four, it tends to appear in such large numbers every single year. So what is this particular plant and what is so special about it? Well, stay tuned, because that's the topic of today's video. This is a plant that's known as self-heal, also known as all-heal, and the Latin name is Prunella vulgaris. And vulgaris means common or usual. And this is a plant that has a long history of use in traditional Chinese medicine, traditional European medicine, and traditional North American medicine. So I really like this plant, not just because it has a lot of traditional use by various cultures throughout the world, but it has a lot of modern research to back up its claims. Now, before we get into the specifics of the medicinal actions of self-heal, let's talk about the identification, because we should talk about the identification so you know how to properly identify this plant before going out and harvesting something that looks like this. This is a short perennial plant that can grow to be a few inches tall, and as I mentioned, has oppositely arranged leaves, and each leaf is much longer than it is wide. The stem terminates in a spike of flowers, and this plant typically flowers from May through about October. There are actually two parts to each flower. There's a purple upper lip, and then there's a white lower lip. And there isn't really any floral scent. So just like whenever you crush the leaves, you don't really detect any aroma. Same thing with the flowers. There's not really any floral scent to this plant. You'll typically find self-heal Prunella vulgaris in your lawn, especially if you live anywhere in the United States. So look this time of year for a purple flowering spike in a plant that has oppositely arranged leaves. But you also see it along roadsides. You'll see it along woodland trails, sometimes into the woods, but not always. But those are typically places where I'm seeing self-heal. Now you might confuse this for other members of the mint family like purple dead nettle or henbit or maybe even creeping Charlie, but those plants typically flower earlier in the year. So if you're seeing a purple flowering spike this time of year with oppositely arranged leaves, probably in your lawn, then you most likely have Prunella vulgaris self-heal. Alright, so what has self-heal been shown to do in the scientific literature? Well, there are three main areas where this plant, Prunella vulgaris, really shines when it comes to human health. And number one is UV protection. Number two is anti-inflammatory support. And number three is immunomodulatory support, working with the immune system. So let's take a look at number one, UV protection. When we look at the sun, we see that the sun's electromagnetic radiation can basically be categorized into three main groups. Number one is UVA radiation, which is longer wave radiation. Number two is UVB radiation, which is medium wave radiation. And number three is UVC radiation, which is shorter wave radiation, and most of that gets absorbed by the ozone layer. And it seems that self-heal offers protection against both UVA-induced injury to the skin and UVB-induced injury to the skin. Now specifically, in 2006, a study was published in the Journal of Photochemistry and Photobiology showing that self-heal offered protection against UVA-induced oxidative stress and DNA damage. And a couple years later, in 2010, in the Archives of Dermatological Research, self-heal prevented UVB-induced injury to keratinocytes. So what the heck are keratinocytes? Well, keratinocytes belong to the predominant type of cells found in the outermost layer of our skin. Now, of course, the sun isn't always to blame, right? We absolutely need healthy sun exposure for optimal health, despite what many people in the media and despite what many health professionals might want us to believe. And we can take full responsibility in these situations. And one of those ways is to consume a lot of antioxidant-rich foods throughout the summer months, but also consume foods and medicines like self-heal that offer specifically protection against UVA and UVB-induced damage to the skin. So self-heal has been shown to offer both protection against UVA-induced injury and UVB-induced injury to the skin. The second key area for which self-heal has been shown to shine in the research is in the areas of inflammation. Now, in 2009 specifically, a study was published in Toxicology in Vitro showing that this plant, self-heal, attenuated inflammation associated with gingivitis. So anytime you see itis after something, that typically means inflammation. So gingivitis is inflammation of the gum tissue. So perhaps this plant that's probably growing in your backyard right now might make for a good oral rinse or a mouthwash. And then a more recent study in 2013 in the journal BMB Reports found that self-heal suppressed inflammation associated with a condition that's responsible for 33% of all deaths in the United States. That's 1 in every 3 deaths. That's attributed to atherosclerosis. Now, atherosclerosis is a chronic inflammatory disease associated with the arterial wall, and it typically manifests itself as acute coronary syndrome, as stroke, and as various peripheral arterial diseases. So this plant is shown to be effective as an anti-inflammatory associated with atherosclerotic conditions. Now, these aren't the only areas of inflammation that self-heal has been shown to be effective for. However, many people are experiencing gingivitis today, and a lot of people are really experiencing atherosclerosis. And so if that's you, or if you know somebody who is experiencing these conditions, maybe turn them on to this video or turn them on to this research and see what this common plant, which can be found probably in your backyard, see what this plant can or can't do for you or them. The third key area where self-heal really shines in the scientific literature is when it comes to something known as immunomodulation. So what the heck is immunomodulation? Well, immunomodulation is essentially the ability of something to either stimulate the immune system or suppress the immune system in a dual directional way based on the body's needs. And in 2005, a study was published in the International Journal of Molecular Medicine showing that an extracted polysaccharide, so long-chain sugar from self-heal, offered immunomodulatory support in two ways. One, by stimulating the immune system, specifically by upregulating macrophages and monocytes, these are white blood cells, but also by attenuating inflammation associated with an overactive immune system. So this is immunomodulation at its finest. And what's so fantastic is that you don't always see this property, immunomodulation, in the plant kingdom. You see it in the fungal kingdom, specifically with many medicinal mushrooms like chaga, reishi, turkey tail, shiitake, and other medicinal mushrooms. But to see it in the plant kingdom is absolutely fantastic. And that's what makes this plant, self-heal Prunella vulgaris, so special. Its ability to offer immunomodulatory support in a dual directional way. So now that we can properly identify self-heal, now that we know a little bit about the medicinal properties of self-heal, what else can we do with it, or how can we apply this to our lives? Well, as I mentioned early on in this video, it is an edible plant. So you can just eat this plant. You can eat the aerial portions of this plant. And what I like about this plant is it doesn't really develop those bitter flavors that many other weedy plants do this time of year. And also it's not too fibrous either. So I basically treat it as a trailside nibble. I'll nibble on the flowers and I'll nibble on the leaves as I walk in the woods. You can also bring some of this home and add it to a salad or use it as a pot herb. You can also make effective medicines out of this plant in three main ways. Number one, you can make a tea or an infusion out of this plant by adding dried material to hot water and letting that simmer for maybe 10, 15 minutes, 30 minutes, or overnight, then straining that out and drinking it. You could add it to soups as well. Number two, you can make an alcohol extract by using, for example, a vodka and adding dried material 1/3 of the way full of a 32-ounce mason jar and topping that off with vodka, straining that out after about 2 to 6 weeks. Then you have an alcohol extract of Prunella vulgaris. And you can also make a topical salve out of this product by adding it to an oil and letting that infuse for about 2 to 6 weeks and straining that out. Then you can also add that to melted beeswax. And I actually have a product at home that I use that contains self-heal, and I use it topically, and it's very, very effective for treating cuts, scrapes, burns, minor cuts, scrapes, burns. But it is a fantastic product. There's a lot of other things that you could do with this plant, but those are three main things that I can think of right now. And I encourage you to get out there and look for this fantastic plant, Prunella vulgaris, self-heal, also known as all heal, and see what this plant may be able to do for you. There's a lot of research out there on this plant, and I'd like to give this plant a lot more credit than many people are currently giving it. So let's do all we can to make sure that happens. Thanks for watching this video, truly appreciate it. I encourage you to subscribe to the YouTube channel, follow me on social media at LearnYourLand, head on over to learnyourland.com, sign up for the email newsletter so that we can stay in touch. Thanks again, I'll see you in the next video.